My name is Ethan. For years, I let people walk all over me because I thought being kind would earn their respect. Instead, it only made me easier to use. I honestly believed there was no way out, until one day changed everything. I never told anyone what happened that night, because I knew they wouldn't believe me. Looking back now, I almost don't believe it myself. 3 years ago, I was the kind of person people only remembered when they needed something. If someone needed money, they called me. If someone needed help moving, they called me. If someone made a mistake at work, I stayed late to fix it. Everyone smiled at me when they needed a favor and forgot my name the moment they got what they wanted. I kept telling myself that being kind would eventually pay off. I couldn't have been more wrong. The day everything changed started like every other day, until I accidentally overheard a conversation that was never meant for my ears. And those few sentences completely destroyed the person I thought I was. I was walking past the conference room when I heard my name. I stopped without thinking. Inside, my manager was laughing with 2 co-workers. "Just give it to Ethan," one of them said. "He'll do it." "He always does," another voice answered. "Exactly. Guys like him are useful. You can dump anything on his desk, and he'll even apologize for asking questions." Then someone laughed and said something I'll never forget. "People like him exist, so people like us don't have to work as hard." They all laughed. I stood there frozen, staring at the floor. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like they could hear it through the wall. That was the exact moment I realized I wasn't respected. I was convenient. And somehow, that hurt even more than being hated. I didn't walk into the room. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I quietly grabbed my backpack, left the office, and walked home in complete silence. That night, I barely slept. Every memory I had replayed itself in my head. Every unpaid overtime shift, every canceled weekend, because someone else needed help. Every promise that my hard work would eventually be rewarded. Around 3 in the morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and asked myself a question I had avoided for years. What if they're not the problem? What if I taught everyone exactly how to treat me? I hated the answer because deep down, I already knew it was true. The next morning, I made one decision. It looked incredibly small from the outside, but it would end up costing me almost everything I had. The first person who asked me to stay late that morning expected the same answer he had heard hundreds of times before. "Hey, Ethan, can you finish my reports? I've got plans after work." I looked at him for a few seconds and quietly said, "No." He actually laughed because he thought I was joking. "Come on, seriously." "I am serious." The smile disappeared from his face. Within an hour, the entire office somehow knew I had refused. People looked at me differently, as if I had broken some unspoken rule. By lunchtime, my manager called me into his office. He folded his hands on the desk and smiled. "You've changed." "Maybe," I answered. "Or maybe I'm just finally saying what I've wanted to say for years." He leaned forward. "Be careful. People who stop being useful don't usually last very long around here." At that moment, I had no idea those words weren't a warning. They were a promise. 3 days later, I was fired. Officially, it was because the company was restructuring. But everyone knew the truth. I packed my things into a small cardboard box, while the same people who had depended on me for years avoided making eye contact. Not one of them said goodbye. Outside, it started raining. I sat on a bench with my box beside me, staring at my phone. My bank account had just enough money to survive for a few weeks. No backup plan, no job offers, no one to call. For the first time in years, I wondered if everyone had been right about me. Maybe I wasn't strong. Maybe I wasn't talented. Maybe I had just confused being useful with being valuable. That thought nearly broke me. But then something happened that I never could have predicted. A single message appeared on my phone from someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 4 years. It was from Daniel, an old co-worker who had quit years before. The message was only one sentence. I heard what happened. Call me if you're finally ready. I stared at the screen for almost 10 minutes before pressing his number. He answered immediately, as if he'd been expecting my call. Before I could explain anything, he interrupted me. Let me guess. They used you until you started respecting yourself. I didn't say a word. Yeah, he sighed. That's exactly what they did to me. Then he told me something that completely changed the way I saw my life. The people who benefit from your weakness will always be the first ones to complain when you become stronger. I wrote that sentence down the moment I got home. I still have that piece of paper today. At the time, I had no idea those words were about to become the foundation of everything I would build next. Daniel invited me to work with him on a small freelance project. The pay wasn't impressive, but for the first time in years, nobody treated me like I was disposable. He didn't care how many extra hours I worked. He cared about results. When I finished the project, he paid me exactly what we had agreed on. No excuses, no last-minute changes, no taking advantage of my kindness. It felt strange, almost uncomfortable. I had become so used to being undervalued that basic respect felt unfamiliar. Over the next few months, I learned skills I should have learned years earlier. I learned how to negotiate, how to say no without feeling guilty, how to walk away from people who only showed up when they needed something. But just when everything finally seemed to be getting better, I made one mistake that nearly destroyed all the progress I had fought so hard to build. A former coworker called me out of nowhere. His voice sounded different, friendly, almost apologetic. He said the company had changed, management had changed, and they wanted me back. The salary was higher, the benefits were better. For a moment, it felt like justice had finally arrived. I ignored the small voice in my head telling me to walk away. On my first day back, everyone smiled. They shook my hand. They acted as if the past had never happened. I wanted to believe people could change. For 2 weeks, everything seemed perfect. Then the requests started again. Can you stay late just this once? Can you cover for me? You're the only one who can fix this. The words were different, but the pattern was exactly the same. That's when I realized something that changed my life forever. Some places don't deserve a second chance, no matter how convincing the apology sounds. That afternoon, I walked into my manager's office before anyone could ask me for another favor. I placed my badge on his desk and said, "I'm leaving." He looked confused. "You just got back. You're making a mistake." For the first time, I smiled. No. The mistake was believing this place had changed. He offered me more money, a promotion, even promised things I'd wanted for years. A few months earlier, I would have accepted without thinking. This time, I stood up and walked away. As the elevator doors closed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Peace. Not because I suddenly had everything figured out, but because I finally understood that self-respect is worth more than any paycheck. I thought that was the end of the story. I was wrong. The biggest surprise came almost a year later when someone knocked on my office door and I recognized the face immediately. I opened the door, and standing there was the same manager who once told me I was only valuable as long as I was useful. He looked older, tired. He asked if we could talk. We sat down, and after a long silence, he admitted the company had fallen apart. Good employees kept leaving, clients followed them, and the people who had spent years taking advantage of others eventually turned on each other. Then he asked if I would consider coming back to help rebuild the business. A few years earlier, hearing those words would have felt like winning. This time, I simply smiled and said, no. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I hated him, but because I had finally learned that success isn't proving people wrong. It's no longer needing their approval. As he walked away, I realized something that took me years to understand. The people who treated me like a doormat didn't change my life. They forced me to change myself. And looking back now, I'm strangely grateful. Because if they had respected me from the beginning, I might never have learned how to respect myself. If you're listening to this and you feel like people only remember you when they need something, remember this. The moment you start valuing your own time, some people will disappear. Let them. The right ones never needed to use you to stay.